Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
People dancing around a fire in various states of dress and undress in the middle of the desert. Sounds like a very pagan thing, and you'd be right, but it took place here. It takes place every year here in these United States of America. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're recording at the Disclosure on the Coast conference from here, The Watchman, in Irvine, California, and joining me is a gentleman who was there to see this take place with his own eyes. He was our man on the scene and has been for the last couple of years. I'm talking about Burning Man, of course, and just back to report on what he saw at Burning Man, as he promised when he was a recent guest on this program, the author of Game of Gods. Let me see the subtitle there again. The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-enchantment. We welcome Carl Teichrib back to the program. Carl, thanks.
Hey, thanks, Derek. It's good.
This is quite a gathering this weekend, and we'll talk about your experience at Burning Man here. But a lot of more than just the information here. I don't know if you're sensing this, but a lot of people coming up and asking and talking about things that are really important to them spiritually, emotionally. There's a lot of ministering and fellowship that takes place in the hallways and in front of the tables here at gatherings like these.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been seeing that. I've been part of a little bit of that. In fact, that was happening a little bit when you came to the table. We were just winding down some of those kind of conversations where we were encouraging each other and talking about some heavy stuff, some good stuff. The other thing I've noticed with this conference specifically is the networking that's going on. Not the networking within the speakers, because that sometimes happens. And honestly, and you know this as well as I do, oftentimes us as speakers, we don't even get to really spend time with each other.
True.
You know?
It's one of those things we look forward to, but then
it rarely happens.
Yeah, because we're busy talking with the folks who've traveled, in some cases traveled very long distances to come here.
Right. A lot of people don't recognize or don't realize that. They assume that we all spend a lot of time together. No, we don't.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, really.
Well, it is. And just beyond the physical differences or physical distances between us is that we're all very busy with our own projects. I mean, the amount of travel that you've done just to attend these transformational festivals that we've talked about over the years. Sharon and I are neck deep in writing projects, also a video project based on our trip to Israel this year. And we discovered something related to that project, and we mentioned it to Tom Horn, and Tom was so excited about it. He says, "Could you crank out another book on that?" I'm like, okay, well, how about if we put off the other project we're going to do? Can I get both of those next year? Okay, well,
I know we're busy,
but it's a privilege to be able to do that.
Right,
but you're right. But the fellowship that we often hope for, but there's never enough of it.
Exactly
at these gatherings.
But what I have found with this one in particular is that that networking, that fellowship, isn't necessarily happening between us as speakers because we're all busy, we're all doing our stuff. But I'm seeing it within the people who are coming.
Yeah.
Just the guys and the girls off the street who intended to come so that they could be edified, built up, receive new information, come away with a better handle of what's happening in the world. And now we're also walking away going, hey, we don't live too far away from each other. Let's trade emails. Let's have this conversation. I had one fellow, a friend, who came to this event specifically to come in and learn, just to listen, and now is walking away with, and I'm watching him having conversations, and he's walking away with a little network. And I talked to him just last night, and he's excited.
Yeah.
He's excited.
About 8 years ago, at a conference, 9 years ago now, a conference in Nashville, which was really the first one I ever attended, a friend of ours, Sam Miller, who is a photographer out of Charlotte, North Carolina area, said, we're in the catacombs. These are the catacombs. And I think what we're doing is we're seeing the networking that may, and I'm not
That's a
and
good
alarmist.
analogy. Yes.
Yeah, but Sam's point was that most of us in our churches are surrounded by people and yet alone, because we recognize that there's more going on than many of us are hearing in our churches. Not all. There are some pastors out there, and some who are here this weekend, by the way, who are awake and aware of what's going on. But if things really get to where we're being oppressed, like the church in China, for example, we may need to exploit these networks, take advantage of these friendships and fellowships that are developing from conferences like Hear the Watchman, to have that mutual support network when times get difficult.
Were you in the room yesterday when Gons gave his presentation?
No, because there was somebody at our table that we were talking with.
I caught most of Gons' presentation, which again, it's rare for us as speakers to actually sit and listen to each other.
Right.
But I was really fortunate. I was able to listen to Gons' presentation for the most part. And at the very end, somebody raised the question, because there's a little itty-bitty Q&A at the end of Gons' talk. And maybe Gons himself did it, I can't remember now, or maybe it was one of the questions that came up in the Q&A. The question being, who in the room here is from Southern California, like within a radius? Hands across the room went up. And you could just almost, it was like a sense of, I'm not alone.
Right.
And then Jeannie was the one who made the suggestion, hey, everybody, I'll set up a sheet. Let's share emails. I'll send out an email to everybody. You guys get together. You guys start to network. You guys build into the local body. Right. Fantastic. That's one of the blessings of events like this.
Yeah. Now you think about it back in the first century when the apostolic age was still here on earth, and the religious authorities in Jerusalem and the imperial authorities in Rome were cracking down on the church, and they had to network without being able to use Facebook or email or text messages. So we actually have it pretty good compared to those guys.
Yeah.
And especially here in the West, we tend to view ourselves as being under tribulation when we get pushback for saying Merry Christmas or God bless you. So we've got a long way to go before we get to that point, but starting to make those connections now is important before it gets to that point, before it's too late.
Right, and just encouraging one another.
And the reason I bring this up is because, again, we come back to the transformational festivals, of which Burning Man is just one, as you documented. The reason I think we're seeing a growing trend to push back against expressions of our Christian faith in the West is because of the transformation that's taking place.
Right.
So now you refer to these as transformational festivals. Why is that something that they call them, the organizers of these groups? And what are they trying to transform into?
Well, they recognize that what they're engaging in is a form of social, spiritual evolution. And that's their language. Okay, you need to understand that, Derek. That's their language. The term Transformational Festival comes out of their own movement. It's not something that has been imputed upon them by outside academics or outsiders looking in. It is their own language. Because they recognize that what is really taking place is people are coming for the music, as people are coming for the experience. Sometimes it's coming without even knowing why they're coming. That at the end of the day, they're engaged in a process of evolution, of cultural evolution that leads to personal transformation, and then that gets shoved out and pushed out into the broader world around them. And it does. It absolutely does.
So why do they see a need for transforming?
Well, this is interesting because I see this as a reflection of what's already taking place in the culture. All right? Events like Burning Man, and Burning Man is just, as you alluded to, one of many, many, many events, is a reflection of the culture that's already begun the transformational process. And not only is it a reflection of it, it's a refinement of it in their worldview. It's a refinement. It's a place where it gets tested, it gets experimented with, it gets played with. It becomes a container to play around with what this looks like. And then it pushes out that energy, that newness back out into the culture. And it's like a repeat cycle. And it isn't that it is changing the culture per se, it is, but it is really a reflection of the culture already around us. And if you want to know where the beginning point really goes to, it's especially in our generation, that's the millennial generation, my generation, I'm in my 50s, education. I mean, we were taught, we were experiencing the beginning of a worldview transformation through our education system.
That's really interesting. One of the divine appointments that was made for us at our table this weekend is a gentleman who's exchanged some emails with me over the past few months. I won't say his name or where he's from, but he is a history teacher at the middle school level.
Okay.
And was describing some of the changes that are being imposed on him by the government authorities that control the school board, which is a government authority.
Right.
And how his area of expertise, American history, which is what he teaches, is being changed. It is being changed to include a focus and emphasis on the LGBT movement,
right,
as though one's preferred form of sexuality has had some sort of critical influence on American and Western history. This is a pretty radical change that I think in our generation, our parents, had they heard about this, would have absolutely flipped out.
Exactly.
And yet within the last, 10 years perhaps, 10, 12 years, we've seen a transformation in the views of not just millennials, but even baby boomers on this particular subject here in the West. Now, we're in California, which is probably ahead of the curve for the rest of the United States, certainly I would imagine for most of Canada as well. So it may be that this is just the leading edge of something that's soon going to make its way into the heartland of America. But we're seeing even elements of that in the little town in which we live, in Crane, Missouri, with the school district making some changes there that have made compelled friends of ours to withdraw their children and begin homeschooling.
I have examples like that in our part of the world too.
What kind of influences have these transformational festivals like Burning Man had on that? I mean, does one follow the other, or is this sort of a chicken and egg question? Is there a feedback loop?
It is a chicken and egg kind of a question, and there is a feedback loop to it. But, transformational festivals, that culture, subculture, comes out of the West Coast U.S. countercultural movement of the 1960s. It's an extension of that, a direct extension.
Yeah.
It's also a direct extension of the personal computing industry, Silicon Valley, and a lot of people don't realize that the counterculture movement of the 1960s was hand in glove with the changes taking place in within the world of digital electronics. Stuart Brand is a great example of that. Stuart Brand is the gentleman who coined the term personal computers. Was on the editorial board, or even helped to set up Wired magazine, along with Kevin Kelly. All of those guys were products of the counterculture of the 1960s. Stuart Brand was part of the happenings and the acid trips of the 1960s. And it's recognized that what was taking place at that point is really the feedstock for the transformation of culture. Not just transformational festivals, but the entire transformation of culture, as it blurred lines, wiped away distinctions, it opened up room to start playing with new forms of spirituality. The East was coming in. The psychedelic world opened up. Aldous Huxley, we all of a sudden discovered Aldous Huxley's world. And this really, and it's ironic because we're sitting here in California, and this was where really a lot of it happened, and that spread around the world. And transformational festivals are really an extension of that. Stuart Brand has described Burning Man as getting everything right about the 1960s. Okay?
So this is 1960s taken to its logical end.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the chicken and egg thing, you watch as the last 50 years, really going back to the early 1970s, I can trace it back especially to Earth Day 1970, specifically. You watch our education system shift with the culture that was changing as well. And they come alongside each other. You can't separate them. They walk together. You can take the issue of education all the way back to the 30s and to the 20s. But there's always these parallelings with each other as the education system changes, as churches change alongside, culture changes too. But you really see where this thing absolutely began to steamroll from 1970 onward.
Now, just to make clear for listeners, I'm not picking on the LGBT movement or sexuality as the only aspect of this. That's just one example and maybe the most obvious to us. But there are other aspects of this as well. What is the ultimate goal then? What are the types of transformation that the organizers of festivals like Burning Man trying to achieve, and how are they manifesting in our culture today?
Let's hold that question for just half a minute, if that's okay, Derek, because I want to get back to your thing with the LGBTQ thing, just briefly. And I always get the letters all mixed up, but we all know what it is. One of the interesting parts of the subculture of transformational festivals is that a component of it was pulled out of the rave community. Ravers in the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the whole rave scene, it was underground. It was a social, musical, artistic, sexual experimentation in many respects. A lot of people just went for the party, but it was way more than a party. It ended up becoming a type of social, spiritual subculture all on its own, and it is. And there's some really interesting history as you unpack the whole thing. But the rave culture was one of the first cultures or subcultures to embrace, in a very real way, same-sex, the LGBTQ environment. Because rave, and especially when you take rave and rave and ecstasy, they go hand in hand, and historically they've gone hand in hand. It opened up this sense of empathy, a collective group experience. Boundaries began to dissolve. Boundaries on the dance floor dissolve. Boundaries between the genders dissolve. Rave did one thing really, really well. It allowed boundaries to dissolve. And it is one of the first kind of subcultures within another subculture, the art music scene, to experientially end up kind of having this happen and accept it and open itself up to it. Which is why one of the things that struck me this year at Burning Man was a very tangible amount of demonstrations I saw of same-sex attraction and coupling. I mean, it was very open. Yeah.
Sharon has made a good case in some presentation. Well, the research that she did for our forthcoming book, Veneration, she wrote several chapters about the ancient Sumerian goddess Inanna, who in various manifestations over the years has appeared as Ishtar, Astarte, Aphrodite, Venus, etc. But also, because lest people think she's just a goddess of love, she was a gender-fluid goddess, god/des, depending on the day, male, female, deity of gender fluid carnality and mindless excessive violence, and you can make a really good case that it is the spirit of the age. Sharon goes so far as to argue that this entity is the woman on the beast of Revelation, the book of Revelation, Mystery Babylon, and I think you can make that case. Drunk with the blood of the saints, the kings of the world, engaging in sexual immorality, which is a euphemism for spiritual wickedness. But we see that in the culture around us with the breaking down of these gender roles, and not just gender roles, but also generational roles. Parents, the design that God created for the family.
Right.
Mother, father, training up their children in the way they should go, and now we're taught that not only can one be whatever gender one chooses to be on any given day, but that physical intimacy between adults and children should also be allowed, that children should be allowed to change their gender. And it's ultimately, it is completely breaking down God's creation of humanity, which he established as like the pinnacle of creation, a little lower than the angels temporarily, but someday we shall judge the angels. It's almost as though the angels are trying to erase us, the fallen.
But boundaries are essential. Boundaries are important.
It is a binary world, and they're trying to erase that division between, the zeros and the ones. Option A, option B. They're trying to.
Which is why I make the argument in my book that oneness is the dominant worldview.
Ah, okay. Eliminating the concept of a binary world, male, female.
In every respect.
In every respect.
Yes. Oneness, so it's expressed, oneness becomes expressed sexually, becomes expressed through the change in gender, this gender revolution that we're having, this sexual revolution. Oneness is expressed within the environmental movement. Oneness is expressed in
the environmental movement, that we are one with Mother Earth, with Gaia.
That's right.
Okay.
Or that we have our allegiance to her.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And that even the gods and goddesses of old, and you know this better than I do, always had this natural reflection, this natural manifestation. Goddess of war, or a god of war, a goddess of fertility. There's always a natural aspect that's brought in.
But then gods of winds, gods of weather, gods of the sea.
Right. Right. There's always this cyclical aspect to it. Non-binary.
So this example then of the LGBTQIA plus whatever movement is actually not, as we try to tiptoe around it, because we don't want to offend anyone. And the point I hoped I made in my presentation on Islam yesterday is that, look, this is not about bashing Muslims, because we need to remember always Ephesians 6:12. We're not wrestling against human opponents, but against principalities and powers.
Right.
Who are they, and what are they trying to achieve? And this sounds like a key component then of this transformation.
Absolutely is. Absolutely. And so this is you could call it the beauty of transformational festivals. It allows that oneness now to be experienced. It's a place where you can transgress the boundaries. And this is something that I've had to wrestle with, the idea of transformation through transgression. How do you transform unless you are willing to transgress the boundaries?
That is a key element of Crowleyan magic.
It's a key element to Genesis chapter 3.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
God gave boundaries.
Right.
Very specific boundaries.
Right.
The promise is, transgress the boundaries, you can become as God.
And again, as practiced by Crowley and his followers, and certainly Crowley was not the first one to come up with this, but he was probably the most prominent of the recent ceremonial magicians we can name.
Absolutely.
And the greater the transgression, the greater the power.
Right. And that was his gift to the counterculture. I mean, up until the counterculture, Crowley was basically almost a non-figure,
right,
in terms of public understanding until the 1960s, and all of a sudden he became the icon of the 1960s. But the reason he became the icon of the 1960s was because of that element. Transgress, transform.
So you were at Burning Man again this year.
And I watched Transgression and Transformation.
Yeah. So what were some of the takeaways from this year's Burning Man festival?
Oh, wow. We had a couple of really interesting workshops that I'm really glad I went. One of the workshops was on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda. And it was at a major camp where influencers go. And keep in mind, you don't have to have crowds and crowds of people coming to these workshops. Sometimes they're quite small. But it's about who goes. And so we had major figures in the cryptocurrency movement. We had one of the gentleman leading the workshop is recognized by the World Economic Forum as one of the young business leaders of this next generation, part of the whole global leadership program that they work with the World Economic Forum. Not small players, small players. And they were talking about how they were now, that night, we're going to live as if we've hit 2030, and what will this look like? Oh, the world is wonderful. We've all come together. Everything is one. We have a world government now. We have a global artistic movement that expresses this new experience that we've had since we've been talking about this at Burning Man. And now that we've made 2030, look how beautiful our world is as we are all experiencing this oneness. It was really, really interesting, Derek, because as different people were speaking who are part of this big camp, the moderator, he's got a pedigree of power. He is an ancestor of Catherine the Great, He's also one of the great grandsons of the first billionaire. He's a power figure, a young power figure. And he was talking about how what Burning Man really is this is the place where we, the grandchildren of the billionaires of old, the billionaires who had their new world order, the Rockefellers, how they had their vision of a new world. Now we've surpassed that. I'm just paraphrasing here, but we basically surpassed that. Now this is where we, the grandchildren of those visionaries, come to flesh out our new world order. Really, really interesting.
So what did that vision look like when they?
That didn't include us. Put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
Because we deal with the reality of separation and otherness and distinctions.
So oneness, for people not familiar with the term, this would be a oneness, almost an Eastern concept, where at the end we achieve nirvana, which is the total loss of self, right?
Right. That is absolutely a part of it. Oneness, and I define it in the book as there is ultimately no distinction between man, God, and nature. Okay, but then how that gets fleshed out and played out, because the reality is otherness. In fact, here's the thing that it kind of just drives me a little bit nuts. I hear oneists, because I'm in those circles a lot. I hear oneists talk about what we need to do is we need to come together as one so that we have hope for tomorrow, a better tomorrow. And I'm like, seriously? If you really believe we're all one, that there really is no such thing as evil, there is no such thing as good, well, there is no such thing as better, there's no such thing as tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you have zero hope.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that doesn't make any sense to me about this is if you basically, everything comes together as one, that's not order, that's chaos.
It's chaos, right.
This is a return to the primordial chaos.
Yes.
From which God created the heavens and the earth.
But any system that gravitates to this sense of a utopian-based sense of oneism, and Barbara Marx Hubbard, one of the leading figures, she passed away, I believe it was earlier this year, within the New Age movement, within the idea of re-enchantment and oneness. She was a grand spokesperson for oneness. She described communism, the Soviet experiment, as just premature oneness. That was her language.
That's the reason it didn't work. It was too early. We didn't do it right. We got to try it again.
Right. But that was a remarkable statement, because it fits the maximum, or it fits the kind of the saying that peace is the destruction of all opposition. Oneness is the destruction of all opposition. If oneness is to work, you need one person to say, I will crush it all and we will be one underneath my rulership. It's false.
Yeah.
It's a false oneness, but it's enforced.
This is why I argued in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, that the Antichrist is Leviathan. Leviathan representing the primordial chaos, the chaos monster, the entity that comes out of the abyss in Revelation 12, the end of Revelation 12, beginning of Revelation 13, wants to return us to that primordial chaos. In Genesis 1, verse 2, when the Spirit hovers over the face of the waters, over the deep, Tehom in Hebrew. It's a cognate for the Sumerian word Tiamat, which was just their name for Leviathan.
Right.
God tamed chaos in Genesis 1, verse 2. They want to return us to chaos. I don't think it's a coincidence that while we see this spread, this growth in the number and scope of transformational festivals, we're also seeing a growth in chaos magic being performed by the followers of the followers of Crowley. He had a couple of followers, Austin Osman Spare and Kenneth Grant, who developed Crowley's magical system into new strains that are now manifest as chaos magic, which again is nonsensical. How can you have a system of magic, a system of anything that is chaos? By definition, chaos is not a system. You can't systemize chaos.
Right.
And yet that's what the oneists are trying to point back to. They're essentially trying to point us to Antichrist, which is chaos. Order was spoken into existence by Christ.
Right. And we've been breaking that down ever since.
And again,
transgression and transformation.
Right. What was the the response? How well attended was Burning Man this year, and how influential do you see this being in our culture?
Okay, I believe the numbers were roughly around 80,000, but that includes, I think, approximately 8 to 10,000 volunteers who aren't ticketed. They're already part of the event. But I understood there was 70,000 ticketed participants. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's pretty significant.
That's more than twice the size of the county in which we live.
Right. For me and where I live in Canadian prairies, it's like it's a major city.
Yes.
You know, it's crazy. One thing that really strikes me is I take note of this. The people I talk to from around the world, I talk to Americans. It's on your soil. It's in Nevada. And U.S. citizens make up the majority of people there. But honestly, I talk to people from Israel. I talk to people from Chile, from Russia, literally all over the world. I sat for 2 hours, had a great conversation for 2 hours with the European Union liaison officer to the U.S. federal government.
Really?
Yeah. Hey, we had 52 U.S. mayors visiting the city this year.
52 mayors
from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, because the U.S. You're asking about the influence.
Yeah.
Listen. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, I believe it was 2 years ago, invited Burning Man into their circle to help them understand the role of art and transformation in urban growth and development. So I think it was more like 3 years ago, because I think in 2017 there was 2 or 3, maybe a few more than that, from the U.S. Conference of Mayors who came in. More came in 2018. This year, 2019, we had 52 mayors coming under the umbrella of the U.S. Conference of Mayors to learn and take lessons back to their cities. We had 4 congressmen that we knew of at the Burn, 3 Democrats, 1 Republican. We heard that from Marion Goodell, who's the CEO of Burning Man. She was explaining that to us in one of the workshops. The World Bank had one of its lead economists, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, who is working on a theory of developing global cities, new global enclaves, and he believes Burning Man is the model for that.
For new global cities?
Yes.
Wow.
This is why when people tell me, a bunch of naked hippies running around out in the desert and they're all naked, sorry, no, you have no clue what you're talking about. I've been there 3 years now. I haven't met hippies. And
of course, some of the leaders of, as you say, Silicon Valley, which is home to some of the most influential and important technology companies.
I talked to lots of tech people, coders and developers.
Well, as you pointed out before, was the first Google Doodle.
Yeah, it was Burning Man.
Yeah. And Google,
symbol.
Not just a search engine, but arguably, you could make a good case Google's the most powerful company on the planet.
Absolutely, and it is. Google really is Burning Man in many respects, and Burning Man really is Google. Okay?
They control the flow of information. Most of us have our reality shaped by the searches that we perform, most of them through Google.
Right. And Eric Schmidt, the CEO that made Google what it is today, the reason he received that job was there was 50 CEOs that were being interviewed for that position. His resume came at the top because he had Burning Man on the resume.
Wow.
Okay, I mean, there is an absolute connection between the two, and a very profound connection. And this goes back again to that connection, that interlock between the counterculture of the 1960s and the computer industry that came along with it, that all kind of grew together, and they all interacted with each other. I mean, in the 1990s, you had what was called the digital be-ins. And it still exists. It's still digital be-ins, which were basically just an extension of the 1960s be-in. I believe the first one was, 67, the be-ins. And they were basically the early version of today's transformational festivals. And in the 1990s, you had a digital version of this. Larry Harvey, the co-founder of Burning Man, would be a speaker at some of the digital be-ins. He made I documented in the book, he makes an interesting argument for kind of like what we need is a new form of social networking, social digital networking. It's not that I'm saying he created the Web 2.0, but he already was dropping little hints that, hey, you guys in the digital world, that this digital be-in Silicon Valley, you need to make your product more social, more interactive, more experiential.
To facilitate this sort of transformation.
There was that kind of thinking was percolating then, and it was all interacting with each other.
We're going to need to get back to our tables because the next session is just about to end here, Carl.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap this up, but we will talk more about this in future, I'm sure. Where do people find your book, Game of Gods?
Amazon, Amazon.com, ironically, Burning Man's Amazon. Because, again, Silicon Valley. And the founder of Amazon is a burner, so there we go. Amazon.com and gameofgods.ca.
Okay.
Gameofgods.ca. You can read excerpts of the book there.
Okay.
You can watch some videos, some interviews, just some other things that might perk your interest. My bibliography is on gameofgods.ca.
Okay, gameofgods.ca. Carl Teichrib, the author of Game of Gods. Thank you for your time today, Carl. Good to see you face to face. We don't do that often enough.
No, I know.
Carl Teichrib is the author of Game of Gods. And if you check the show notes at VFTB.net or wherever else you're listening to this podcast, whenever you're listening to this podcast, you'll find a link to where you can find a copy of the book, which is an essential addition to your reference library. Get a copy of it, read it, highlight it. You won't be sorry you did. Coming up, how you can save $50 a ticket. $50 a ticket on the first conference of 2020. L.A. Marzulli, Paul McGuire, Sharon, me, and more. That and news on the big speakers coming to the SkyWatchTV conference next August. Straight ahead as A View from the Bunker continues.
Unveiling the ancient realms of demonic kings and Satan's battle plan for Armageddon. SkyWatch TV is proud to announce 2 new special offers. The Veneration Collection with optional Red Wing Saga series. First, in Derek and Sharon Gilbert's new groundbreaking book, Veneration, you will learn how the giants of old shaped the worldview and religion of the Hebrews, and the role they will play in the end times. How veneration of the dead brought disaster on the Israelites. Concealed references of ancestor worship among the Canaanites, and so much more. But for a limited time only, when you purchase Veneration from SkyWatch TV, you'll also receive Realms of the Dead, Book 6 in the Red Wing Saga from Sharon K. Gilbert, that explores the true historical link between Mount Hermon and Jack the Ripper. The key characters of this supernatural thriller will face their most terrifying challenge yet, as a powerful new watcher has joined the confrontation that could bring forth the Antichrist and the end of days. But that's not all. You'll also receive the brand new DVD documentary, The Search for the Raphaim, where Derek and Sharon Gilbert take you on a guided tour of the Holy Land, ground zero in the long war with the fallen realm. You will see mysterious Gilgal Raphaim created for the veneration of the dead, the plains of Moab, where worshiping the god of the underworld brought disaster on Israel, and bonus teachings by guests like Pastor Carl Gallups and Messianic Rabbi Zev Parat. And for a limited time only, you'll receive absolutely free the brand new reprinting of the original 1921 classic work, Immortality and the Unseen World, which reveals the Hebrew concepts of the supernatural realm, death, angels, and demons. Sold separately, this exclusive offer retails for $90. Yours now for only $35 plus shipping and handling. But wait, now you have the option to upgrade and expand your collection by including all 5 previously released books in the Red Wing Saga, where you'll learn spiritual warfare through gripping stories with characters you'll love. The expanded collection, which includes all 8 books and The Search for the Rephaim DVD documentary, holds a retail value of $190. Yours now for your donation of only $100 plus shipping and handling. So don't delay. Order the Veneration Collection with optional Red Wing Saga series now. Available at SkyWatchTVStore.com or call 1-844-750-4985.
Driving the internet to think, that is our mission, and this is A View from the Bunker. On demand every Sunday night from the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. I am Derek Gilbert. Thank you for letting us into your ear holes tonight. Coming up next week, we talk about the FBI's data dump. They released their files on a group called The Finders. The Finders. Apparently a cult created for some reason by the Central Intelligence Agency back in the 1970s, 1980s, came to the attention of law enforcement in Florida and Washington, D.C. when a couple of guys were caught in Tallahassee with some very dirty, disheveled children who didn't seem to know how basic household items worked. They seemed unfamiliar with things like toilets, telephones, televisions. And these are children who were in their 6-7-year-old range, so police were naturally suspicious, especially when the guys told them they were taking them to Mexico to found a school for gifted children. This was connected back to Washington, D.C. I'll go into this more next week, but what's fascinating about this is that the FBI has released this now. And what they found when they raided a warehouse connected to this group called the Finders suggested that these guys, somehow connected to the CIA, were involved in child trafficking around the globe, including to places like the Middle East, North Korea, and Hong Kong. I mean, it's just very, very bizarre. But one of the documents included in this FBI dump was related to the McMartin preschool case, which is the classic case held up by skeptics of satanic ritual abuse, people who claim that there is no such thing as ritual abuse, that appears to debunk the debunking. So Dr. Gregory Reed will join us next Sunday night. That's November 10th, 2019, as we discuss the significance of the FBI's document release and recapitulate what we know about the Finders, what the FBI concluded, what was found by U.S. Customs Service in their investigation, and also discuss the McMartin preschool case again. So Dr. Gregory Reed, who is an expert in ritual abuse cases and deliverance, he will join us next Sunday night here on A View from the Bunker at VFTB.net. Save $50. $50 a piece on tickets for the first conference of 2020. This is a gathering in Dallas that will feature L.A. Marzulli, Paul McGuire, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Michael Lake, Coach Dave Daubenmeier, and more. Sharon and I will be there. The normal registration rate for this is Hear the Watchman. The conference is called the Remnant Warrior Conference, and normally it's $129. But as a super early bird rate, Hear the Watchman, Mike Kerr, Jeannie Moore offering $79 per registration, but only through November 15th of 2019, which means as you're hearing this, the earliest you'll hear this is tonight, November 3rd, which means you've got less than 2 weeks to take advantage of it. So, hearthewatchmen.com is the website, hearthewatchmen.com through November 15th, just $79 to register for this conference, March 6th through 8th in Dallas. This is at the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center in Grapevine. Again, March 6th through 8th. The Hilton there is a great hotel. It's a great location for the conference. They're moving this out of the main conference area into the theater. So this will be a little more... I think the seating will be better. I think the acoustics will be better. And the book tables, as I understand it now, will be outside the room where the speakers are, which I think also solves a problem because as people want to talk to speakers, want to talk to people at book tables, that can be difficult if you're in the same room with the next speaker. So this should be a great gathering, a little more intimate, I guess, because the theater, I think, seats about 350, 400. So a little smaller of a venue than the main conference hall. But I think it's a good change for the good. And again, you can get in at a discount right now on the Super Saver rate, just $79 through November 15th of 2019. If you're in the UK, Sharon and I would love to see you at the end of April as we're going to Troon in Ayrshire, which is near Glasgow. It's on the west coast of Scotland, for the Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. Our friend in Scotland, Juan Renau, is coordinating this. This is the first time he's doing this. He's rented the hall there in Troon, seats a couple hundred people. Nice hotel very close by, an excellent cafe very close by that will be catering, bringing lunches over to the venue so we won't have to leave the building and try to find a place to eat, especially if you're not familiar with the area. Jim Barfield, director of the Copper Scroll Project, will be there to speak. Pastor Billy Crone, Sharon and I will both be speaking. And all of us will be speaking multiple times during the 3 days, April 24th through 26th of 2020. Evangelist Stephen Wright coming over from Ireland as well. The cost, £54.50 for 3 days. Single day ticket, that's $29.50, which is very reasonable. I think in U.S. dollars, that's, 55 pounds is roughly, $70? I'm just guessing off the top of my head. Something like that. Anyway, for more information, check the website, VFTB.net or ScottishBibleProphecyConference.brushfire.com. ScottishBibleProphecyConference.brushfire.com. So we got something going almost every month throughout 2020, and we're excited about that. The Battle Ready Conference coming to San Antonio in June 25th through 28th. Stephen Bankars, Russ Dizdar, Pastor Carl Gallups, Brandon Gallups, Rabbi Zev Porat, and a couple of opportunities for some wonderful worship music. John Schlitt will be there again. There will also be a special pre-conference concert by Cutlass on June 25th. Conference itself runs the 26th through the 28th. Again, Battle Ready Conference, June 25th through 28th at Battle Ready Conference in San Antonio, the Grand Hyatt San Antonio, battlereadyconference.org. The True Legends Conference back in Branson. This year it's going to be, or next year rather, it's going to be in July. It's going to be in July 10th through 12th. The theme next year, Ancient Cataclysms and Coming Catastrophes, Pre-Adam and the Return of the Days of Noah. This should be really, really interesting. Steve Quayle, L.A. Marzulli, Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. I will be speaking next year. Russ Dizdar, Dr. Michael Lake, Carl Teichrib, our guest tonight, will be there as well as one of the featured speakers. This will be really, really intriguing and right up the alley of the research Sharon and I have been doing regarding the Rephaim, the recent discovery on the Golan Heights that we talked about with Dr. Judd Burton and Doug Van Dorn, who gets credit for actually finding this first. That's the Serpent Mound of Bashan. So this, my presentation next July may have something to do with that. Tickets for this will go on sale in just a couple of weeks at gen6.com. The True Legends Conference next July. The Defender Conference from SkyWatchTV, we're really excited about this because Tom Horn has outdone himself. First of all, the conference is moving to the Chateau on the Lake in Branson, which is a beautiful facility overlooking the stunning Table Rock Lake. Sharon and me, we're blessed to live about 5 miles from the lake, but this hotel overlooks it, and it is absolutely amazing. August 27th through 30th of 2020, featured speakers include Pat Boone, Governor Mike Huckabee, Dr. Alveda King, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn, and Tom Horn, who's going to be speaking for the first time in 4 years at a conference, and this might be the last time he speaks at a conference. He's just at a point where he doesn't like to do it anymore. Other speakers include, Sharon, me, Pastor Carl Gallups, Dr. Michael Lake, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Dr. Michael Heiser, and Jacob Buyens, who is an activist for children who have been trafficked, especially for and sexually abused. Which kind of gets back to the theme of next week's program here on A View from the Bunker. This is selling out very quickly. We're already more than 2/3 sold out for this conference next August, so don't wait. DefenderConference.com. If you register early, by the way, it's $105, but in addition to registering for the conference, you're getting a bunch of stuff, like the DVD set from this year's conference, some books, but basically $300 worth of stuff, plus you get the registration from the conference. That's only good through January 1st, but the conference is going to sell out before January 1st, so don't wait on that. Other things coming, the Glacier Prophecy Summit. This is something brand new. Sharon and I are going to be taking an Alaska cruise and teaching prophecy along with Gary Stearman from Prophecy Watchers, L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Billy Crone, Bob Ulrich from Prophecy Watchers, Jeff Kinley, Dr. Larry Ollison. That's coming up September 6th through 13th of 2020. For information on that, log on to glacierprophecysummit.com, glacierprophecysummit.com. Next October, we go back to Israel, and we hope you can join us because our extension next October will take us to Sardinia. We're going to go check out the megalithic sites there and compare and contrast the architecture and religious symbolism of the pagans there with what we find in ancient Israel. So, LipkinTours.com. Rabbi Zev Porat will come with us. Donna Howell from SkyWatchTV will be joining us this time around as well. The date's October 12th through 25th with an optional 4-day extension. As a special option, if you only want to go to Sardinia, we can make that happen too. October 29th through November 5th of 2020. LipkinTours.com for the information. Leave us a review at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever else you find A View from the Bunker, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And remember, we are a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. His website is www.incompetech.com. Our opening announcer, DC Good. Next week on this program, it will be a dark subject, but one that's important as we try to debunk the debunkers. Dr. Gregory Reed to talk about The Finders. That's November 10th, 2019, here at A View from the Bunker. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.